Welcome and thank you for tuning in to the Visit the Northeast of Scotland podcast with me, your host, Jacqueline van den Akker. We're heading into the hills today with mountain guide Garry Cormack from Hillgoers. Garry shares with us his adventures on the hills and what he loves about getting outside and into nature. Hillgoers offer guided walks throughout Scotland with their team of qualified mountain guides and have dedicated time to working with the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme to help young people develop skills and knowledge to become adventurers too. Having a profound respect for nature and our environment, guests will not only learn new skills, but develop a deeper appreciation of our history and landscape along the way. Welcome, Garry, and thank you for joining me today on the podcast Visit the Northeast of Scotland. I'm very excited to find out more about you and Hillgoers and everything that you do. So can you get us started with this episode today by giving a bit of a background about yourself and about your business, Hillgoers?
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me along, and it's really kind of you to offer me to share some of my stories, etc. So yeah, my name is Garry Cormack. I stay in a wee village called Dramoke, which is in Royal Deeside. Been here for about 20 odd years now, and we own a company called Hillgoers.com, and another one which is Wild Scottish Weddings, which I can maybe touch on as well later on. But Hillgoers is our main activity that we've been doing now for the last 6 years. So it's myself and the wife and a team of great freelance staff that we take on through the year, which is super. So it's an outdoor activity provider, and we offer things like guided walks, hill skills courses, winter skills, Duke of Edinburgh Award, which is quite a big chunk of our year now, trail running and weddings, that's said. Different things.
How did you set up the business? Have you always been a walker yourself?
Yeah, I've been walking since I've been pretty wee. Yeah, I've always been into walking and the outdoors. It didn't come naturally, I guess, that I stumbled into this job that I'm doing now. I used to work, as a lot of people do, in the northeast of Scotland, up in the oil industry. And during my time there, which I worked for 24 years for one company, and during that time, I used to go do a little bit of hill walking. So I didn't do hill walking when I was sort of my younger years, playing golf and outdoor sort of stuff. I stumbled into hill walking. My first experience was doing Outward Bound, probably when I was about 18. So we did a sort of multi-day trek across Scotland at that point for a few days. And then after that, just started doing a bit more. Did quite a lot of hill walking and stuff through my 20s into my 30s, my early 30s, and then stumbled across a little bit of a back injury, which kept me off the hills and got to the point of I couldn't walk more than maybe a couple of kilometres before having to sit down. And so in 2012, took the decision at that point to go and get the operation done, which was a big step for us. So I now have an artificial disc in my spine. And since then, I started working part-time in my old job. I was getting back into the hills and, physio and walking more. So I left in 2015 and started Hillgoers pretty much straight away.
You make it sound very easy. You just mentioned, we started walking, but having met you earlier in the summer as well, and my own experiences in trying to gain the strength to do some hill walking, it's not as easy as you make it sound. So it must have taken quite a while to recover from such a serious operation.
Yeah, but I was 3 months off my work, and prior to going in for the op, I did try and get as fit as possible that I could within the limits of the pain I had in my back. Then after operation, I spent a lot of time on physio. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if I reflect on my back injury and the years of going to chiropractors, osteopaths, acupuncture and all that kind of stuff, my advice to anyone would be, go to physio, get some physio. It's those muscles, I think, in the long term, that make the real difference. Not that the other treatments didn't help, but in my experience, I think getting the strength, just pushing yourself, doing that little bit extra every day, makes a difference. So it did take a while.
Yeah.
So it did take time to get back to fitness, but I was pretty fit at that point. Not long after, about 6 months after, I was really good to go.
Mm-hmm. So what was the aim in setting up Hillgoers? What do you hope to achieve by offering the services
Well,
you do?
the aim at the time was I was really enjoying my walking, and I just wanted to turn a sort of hobby into a job. I thought that would be great, So I signed up for an outdoor challenge called the TGO Challenge, which was a across Scotland walk, which happens every year. 300 participants from all over the world come and do this challenge through the Great Outdoors magazine. So I did that. When was that? 2016 during the summer. At the same time, I was getting as much hills in as I could, because I'd already signed up for the mountain training scheme. And now you have to become a qualified mountain leader. You have to do a certain amount of quality mountain days in Scotland and elsewhere in other areas of the UK. So I was going around, went out to Lake District and spent quite a few days down there. I was just trying to get as much hills done and get this qualification in place, turn a hobby into a job. Wasn't quite sure how it was going to go. I'm a very fortunate person that I've, had that company background, and this at that point, my wife was still working for a oil company as well, the same one that I was at actually. I had the background of hard working, me doing a hobby job, wasn't earning a lot of money at Hillgoers when it first started off.
Yeah.
That's when you start any business, it's exactly the same. So it was never really about the money. For me, it still isn't really. Because if it was about money, I would just be still where I was. It was a lifestyle choice. To begin with, it was to sort of tick things over until I've got a magic date of 55 where I pull my company pension and I'm off into the wild. No, that's not going to happen now. But so I don't ever see myself retiring. Actually, as long as I'm still fitter than my clients, just keep going out in the hills and doing hill skills and all that sort of stuff, because it's a great job. Love my job. Yeah. So, but now obviously things have evolved, as things do with all businesses, and we're getting busier. And through the years, I keep tweaking. We're quite hard working. Yeah, the business is evolving, and we're adding more things in all the time. Sarah, my wife, joined the company full time as of last year, which was perfect timing, obviously, because we knew we were going to be in for a busy year last year, 2020, as everyone thought it was going to be a great year. And then, so she resigned from her job in January, did her last day in the office, I think it was 25th or 23rd of March, as soon as we went into lockdown. So we're both sitting in the house with no income coming in. We're thinking, well, this wasn't a good decision. So,
can I go back, please?
Yeah. But it's worked out fine, So we actually, the good thing is about outdoor industry that we were able to get going again relatively quickly. But it's been a challenging couple of years for everyone, that's for sure.
Indeed. So you mentioned you now have, from what I could see, a fairly large selection of freelance mountain leaders that work with you now. So how has that team developed?
To begin with, I was focusing on guided hill walk days and hill skills things. And it was through just a network of sort of friends and people just getting in touch who wanted to come and work with us, I guess. We run it more or less like a cooperative. That's how, even though it's not a cooperative, it's how we see it. So we look after our staff. And I think that's gotten around. And, we've got a great team, some of the best out there, I think. So we very grateful for that. And it's just built up, because as we've got busier, we've had to take on more. I've only got one pair of legs. That's the thing. And as you appreciate, as things get busier, so does the back office stuff. So that's, what Sarah's helping with. So yeah, office is busy, and, we've got guides now and mountain leaders all over Scotland pretty much that operate everywhere. We've got trail running going on, which is a sort of new thing for us. And the winter stuff with some really good quality people. I'm not a qualified winter mountain leader, so you need to have that qualifications to do that sort of stuff.
So where do you take people for their guided mountain walks? Pretty
much anywhere in Scotland at the moment. I am in the back of my mind thinking about Lake District, but that might be a couple of years' time and stuff. But mainly, we're a Scottish company, and mainly our demographic is northeast of Scotland. A really good repeat business, and I'm grateful for that. My customers are the best. So a lot of Monroe bagging. People love to bag Monroes. So we do pretty much all the hills, but there is 282 of them. We've got quite a few we've not run as a company, so we'll be adding more of those on as the years go. So yeah, anywhere really. And we do low level stuff as well. I mean, we had clients up recently from the States, and we did a coastal walk
Mm-hmm.
It's up in the Moray Coast, and that was beautiful, beautiful day, beautiful area, which I know really well because that's where I'm from originally. So yeah, we do low-level treks. One of the popular walks we do is called the Larrigrue, and that's a mountain pass through the Cairngorms, which is quite a famous one. We do that quite a few times through the year. Offered transport, we've got a nice minibus and stuff like that, so we take people around in them. So yeah, it's anywhere is the answer.
Tell me more about the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, because you were mentioning earlier that's been quite a big project for you this year. So what's involved with that, and what does the Duke of Edinburgh Award mean?
Well, the Duke of Edinburgh Award has been going on since the 1950s, when the Royal Highness set it up. And it provides an opportunity for young people to integrate with communities and go and explore wild places, test themselves, test their resilience. It's just a great scheme. So it's got 4 sections to it, really. So there's volunteering. So they have to go and volunteer for a certain time. And then they've got to do a sport, which could be football or whatever they want to do. And then they've got to do a skill and the expedition. So the expedition is what we look after, the expedition section. So we assist them to provide a safe area for them to go and do an expedition. Unfortunately for us this year, we did do a little bit of camping, but because of COVID, we've had mainly day walks. So for a gold expedition, that's quite a challenge for some young people because it's 4 days, 3 nights, trekking maybe 20, 25 kilometres a day. Ultimately, we can do that anywhere in Scotland. We've been doing it relatively close to the schools that we work with in Aberdeen and in the Shire. It's a scheme that is for some who have never stepped out of a city, are now put into a wild place, disconnected from technology, apart from occasional phone signal they might find, which they're desperate to find, by the way. So it's great, and it's life skills. It's total life skills. Some of them, it's even small things like learning how to cook on a pan. Learning how to clean a pan after they've cooked on it. Yeah. Things like
it's a huge thing. If you've never been out in the countryside before, and all of a sudden you have to do this expedition, what seems for some as a fairly normal camping event maybe would be utterly life-changing for someone who's never had that experience before.
Yeah, and if you look out the window today when it's absolutely horrible. Well, it's not horrible. It's raining quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's typically, that can be a normal day for a Duke of Edinburgh expedition. And what you begin to realise is after you go out and you've walked a day in that conditions, and then you get to your tent and all this sort of stuff. Firstly, it tells you that you can do it. You can go outside when the weather's horrible. It's not a big deal. You just put on the kit and the gear and you just get on with it, and you can still have a great day. So, and then, they get to the tent and they set up their camp. They've had a good day. For some, it just makes them aware that they only need basic things. You only need to be warm, food, shelter, speaking to your friends, company, to be happy, and getting them off of those phones, disconnect with technology, connecting with nature. It's a huge thing, I think.
It is, even for people who are not participating in the Duke of Edinburgh. People of all ages can really get a huge benefit from getting outside. And one of the things I noticed when I was doing some background research as well is with your navigation skills. I noticed some of the posts that you were putting on social media about the various events were including people of all ages. And I noticed that some of them were more mature, like myself. And I thought, it's a wonderful opportunity to get out and learn a new skill. Have you noticed that people of all ages are participating in these?
Even from the start, when I started doing this, I would say it's always been all ages. Like I'm back out tomorrow on Benihee doing another hill skills course, and it ranges, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but it's from 15 up into, I think, up into the 60s. We do get a range for those courses, which is good. Some people are experienced, but they've forgotten some of the skills, so they're coming back to get a refresh and get updated what's going on with navigation skills for the hills today, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And others are completely new, never been out before on that sort of stuff, and never been out on hill walks, and are a bit fearful to go out without having some knowledge. There's definitely been a trend, and it is trending, more people are going out. My main demographic is probably leaning towards females, I would suggest, which is basically because I think blokes are overconfident. And it's usually the gents that end up getting mountain rescued. So that's
So what kind of skills are you teaching people when they're first starting out on the hills?
So we run these hill skills courses, and mainly in Aberdeenshire, but we've also got them running in Dunkeld as well. So tomorrow we'll be looking at emergency procedures. So what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if you get lost? But we'll talk through the basics of before you even set out on the hill. So before you go, procedures. What do you do before you even think about packing your rucksack? These sort of things. What you're looking at the weather forecasts. You're planning a route. How do you plan your route? Who are you going to tell where you're going? And then we spend quite a lot of the day talking through navigation and using the map and the compass and strategies to make sure you know where you are and you know where you're going, and you just don't end up getting lost. That's the main parts of it, I guess.
And is that a combination of old-fashioned compass and modern-day technology, or do you touch on that at all?
Yeah, we do talk technology. We for the introduction hill skills courses. Yeah, so we do spend a lot of time looking at maps, and we do talk about compass. More advanced courses, because we do this National Navigation Award scheme, which is a nationally standard recognised way of how to teach navigation.
I was thinking we've all heard examples, certainly this year and last year even more so, where people want to get out in nature. We were encouraged to get out in nature and walk and exercise, but people being underprepared and expecting to have a mobile phone signal and Google Maps on the hills, which obviously isn't going to be enough in 99% of the cases. So it's really just giving people an idea of what they would need to prepare, very basic preparations before they go off into any of the hills.
Yeah, I mean, I've over the last year, even prior to that, I've seen loads of people with mobile phone app navigation and using their mobile phones to get around the hills. And I had one occasion this year where I had a lady on the hill come up and ask me for directions, and she had printed off what looked like a Google map as on an A4 piece of paper. Obviously, this map had no contour information. It was just one of those green maps with, you see streams and stuff, but there was nothing on it that would give you any. So that's not a map. So yeah, mobile phones is, and I use my mobile phone, and they have got their place for sure. They're great pieces of kit, but they've got a lot of downfalls this time of year, especially. It was snowing in the hills this week. So they're all made with lithium batteries and stuff, and they're just not designed to work in the cold weather. So I've seen me with 50, 70% battery, take my phone out, try and take a photo or a little bit of video, and the thing just switches off because they just don't work in cold weather. And if that does happen to you, by the way, you can stick it under your armpit for 10 minutes and it won't come back to life, but you lose a bit of battery life.
Yeah.
So there's definite downfalls, and I use a couple of apps on my phone as well, which are really good. The one that everyone should have, it's free to download, is called OS Locate. So it's made by Ordnance Survey, and it pops up as soon as you press it with a grid reference, which is a great thing, because if you have a grid reference, you can relocate that back onto your map if you know how to do it, and that'll tell you where you are. So it's a GPS on your phone. So all mobile smartphones these days have GPS systems on them, and they work even in flight mode. So that's what I do when I'm on the hill. I've got my phone on flight mode because that saves the battery, and the GPS will still work. But also, I've got another app which is called View Ranger, which is now changing over to Outdoor Active, I think. And again, that's a similar sort of thing that works off GPS. But I have seen it in bad weather where it just struggles to find a GPS signal. So that's not, it does happen. Maybe I've seen it about 4 or 5 times a year. It happens to me. I was once up on a hill near Cloughnabent, and the phone system had me over near Rothy Norman. So it's got downfalls.
Yeah.
It's taking a risk if that is your only way of navigating around a hill. So having that skill of a map and being able to read it, and using your compass and having your phone as a backup is the way to go.
It's the best combination between the two. There are lots of places where you have intermittent reception, and the weather changes, conditions change really quickly, and before you know it, you can be stuck somewhere with not really any sense of direction on where to go. And not all the paths are really nicely laid out. Some of them really are more animal tracks than they are anything else.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's right. If you're up in the hills and sometimes there's no paths, or it's quite easy to lose the path. I'm up Loch Nagar quite a lot, and just about every time I'm up Loch Nagar, when they come off the top of the hill, because the path gets it's gets hard to read, and people start drifting off. Ended up drifting off towards Loch Calta. And then about a wee while later, they'll say, oh, this doesn't feel right. And then they'll think, oh, this isn't right. So they start walking all the way back up to the top of the hill again to find themselves and then try and find their way back down the right of them. It's a common occurrence.
So what do you enjoy most about getting onto the hills?
There's a lot of things I enjoy about the hills in Scotland. But to be honest, I enjoy being outside. That's, as long as I'm out, even walking the dog is nice. But the sense of remoteness you get in the hills in Scotland is something else, really. In the middle of the Cairngorms, where I usually spend a lot of my hill walks, you can be there and you not see any other light pollution or any other habitation for a mile. You can't see some sections of it. So you're in there in a place that has pretty much been the same for thousands of years. And it's just connecting with that sort of places, history, human history, the wildlife, the seasonal flowers, all that sort of things, sense of place. It's just great, I think. It's lovely to be in that sort of places.
You mentioned human history, and I did see you mention that on your website as well. Are you talking about the legacy of people who may have lived there at one point, how they've changed the landscape, or how that's changed since they left? Yeah, mainly. There's loads of books out there that describe what's, the historical facts around where we live. And Deeside, Donside, it's the history of like a place like Benihee is just fascinating, really, So when I'm at Benihee quite a lot, and I don't do many guided walks at Benihee, but when I do, I'll talk them through the things that happened at Benihee, the English quarry and all that sort of stuff. 1822, when this quarry finished, it was called the English quarry because all the stone went down to the Thames Embankment in London. And that just blows my mind. I'm thinking, stone from Benihee, how does that get big granite blocks of stone transported all the way down to London? And then, at Benihee also, you've got the first recorded casualties of World War II, on Benihee, September the 3rd, 1939. This sort of stuff. The place is full of history from Pictish times, even to the more recent stuff going on. So it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult sometimes to tell exactly what happened when all you see is a pile of rubble in first impressions. And then when you realize it's actually an ancient hill fort, and what you're seeing is vitrified stone, which is not just any stone, but stone that's actually been heat treated. It's interpreting your landscape and telling the stories behind it that makes it really interesting.
It is. It's great. And like I said, there's loads of good books. I try and read these things, but I forget quite a lot, so I have to reread it again. But being out in the hills helps you connect with it. Marlodge Estate, there's a lot of stuff there. There's good archaeological surveys at Marlodge. So you can go and look for things on the map. If you go to the National Library of Scotland, they've got a mapping system in there where you can click on the button and go back in time and see what the maps were like hundreds of years ago. And you think, well, that's amazing. Then you can compare that to modern day maps and say, okay, well, I'm going to go and try and find this kiln today, or something like that. So there's lots of things to go and see.
I also want to just touch on climate's a huge thing at the moment. I think tourism as a whole, certainly in Scotland, is becoming more aware of the impact that they have on the environment and on the communities itself. Many of us are starting to look at becoming more green and more sustainable. And I noticed that you have signed up to the Tourism Declares, which is one of the sustainability and eco initiatives for tourism and hospitality in Scotland. Can you tell us about your involvement with that and what actions you take?
It's always in the background of my thoughts. Climate is a big thing for us, and there's quite a lot of climate anxiety building, I think. So for us, we as a family have made decisions. For us, we've always had that in mind. So even like 7-8 years ago, we got the solar panels fitted on the roof. Making those changes, there's a good display just now at Benihee again about carbon capture of certain ways of life choices, about what you eat and how you travel and how you communicate and all this sort of stuff. It's worth going to see. So for us as a company, I realise we've got a bit of a carbon footprint, and we realise that we take people into places that causes a bit of an impact. So we're very aware of that. Like I say, we try and be as green as possible. The outdoor industry needs to do more, I think. So things, what we can do is we do have a grove with Trees for Life. So we've set up our own tree planting thing. So we've got a few trees in there, and we'll try and continue to contribute towards that. from a point of view of taking people into the hills and the people into the wild places, we only take small groups because there is impact and there's damage and there's erosion. The other thing we do is we go and we volunteer. So next month, I'm going back to Balmoral Estate to do probably more ring barking on the trees and things like that to create more habitat for capercaillie. So we've been doing that for the past few years, and we'll be building on that a little bit more. Duke of Edinburgh next year, where we're starting up this other section of it called residentials, which is something that the gold groups have to do. They have to do a residential, and we're going to be doing that. And it's going to be a conservation-based thing, which is going to be good for young people to get out and help with a little bit of conservation and understand their impact. And I think the other thing for us is we, as outdoor organisations, have a responsibility to do a little bit of outdoor education, or a good bit of outdoor education. Yesterday, the day before, I was out on a skills course, and part of the syllabus now for the National Navigation Award Scheme is about sustainability. It's quite most of the day actually talking about, as we walked, talking about carbon offsetting or how our impact is on the hill, leaving food scraps and things like that. You hear a lot of that on the news, and you see it in social media about people leaving banana skins at the top of hills and things. And folk will say the thing like that does biodegrades. It takes it about 2 years to break down. What you don't hear, though, is about food scraps and apple cores and banana skins and how that actually changes the ecosystem of the hills and some of these pretty wild places we go to, because it attracts insects and it attracts rodents and it attracts corvids, all this little food scraps. And while they're there, they're going to have a go at the wildlife that should be there. So things like the ptarmigan and the high mountains just now are really up against it because of climate change. You see that the snow and the Cairngorms now is melting pretty much every year. The ptarmigan are fighting for habitat, and while we're up there, we're leaving our food scraps, which attracts corvids, like big ravens and stuff. They will have a go at ptarmigan. So we need to be mindful that what we leave behind.
So that's one of the key principles you would say about how we could be more responsible tourists and visitors into our outdoors is to leave no trace. And I know that's often talked about, but we do sometimes dismiss things like apple cores as not actually damaging to the environment.
Yeah, it obviously, I think it depends, obviously where you're walking, and you've got to be mindful of that. It's just an education thing. Leave no trace and just take everything home. It's quite simple, really. I know for a fact, that we are impacting some of the wildlife in this area and in the hills. Capercaillie is a good example. We've probably only got about capercaillie, maybe 20 left in B side, 20, 30 birds maybe, if we're lucky. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's a very low number. One male capercaillie left in Glen Tanner, which is really sad.
Now, you touched as well on the topic of your outdoor weddings as well.
I did.
So,
yes, a happier note.
On a happier note, yes, it's not the easiest of segues to go. But I just have visions of people in their wedding outfits standing on top of a hillside. Is that an appropriate assumption?
Yeah, it is. So wildscottishweddings.com. Yeah, so we started that in 2019. Again, pre-COVID. So we had one wedding in 2020, actually. That was our first one, was in January 2020, and it was an Australian couple who eloped, and they were great. They came over, and we had a backup plan, and they ended up getting married in the backup plan, which was inside the drawing room in the Fife Arms in Braemar, because the weather was in January, coming from Australia. It was a bit of a culture shock for them. So, but it was a beautiful day in the afternoon. So in the afternoon, we managed to take them out. We got them some nice pictures and stuff like that. So this year we've had weddings. We've been up to Monroe level. So we had a great Monroe wedding in Ben Vreck, where we guided the couple up. Same sort of thing. They eloped, took their dog, and we guided them up. And guided also. That was at Mar Lodge Estate. Obviously, so they helped us and they guided the photographer and the registrar back down, and I guided the couple to the middle of the Cairngorms at Loch Etchkin, set up their camp for them. Obviously, I disappeared at that point, but I came back and got them in the morning, and we went over the top of Ben McDewey, Derek Cairngorm, and back to the car park. The wedding side of things is actually getting pretty busy, which is interesting. I think people are, again, it's maybe linked to, we started it as a climate thing we talked about earlier. People are beginning to maybe realise the impact on climate of big weddings, and things like that. I don't know. But outdoor weddings are definitely getting more popular. Sarah does most of the wedding stuff, so she looks after all the wedding planning things. I just chip in now and again to talk about locations or say help with the guiding on the day.
Oh, good. Well, it's an interesting sister company to Hillgoers, and you can spread your skills and knowledge to both of those. Well, we're kind of coming down to the end of the podcast at this point. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to add or share with us?
Not that I can think of just now, but probably will do later.
Well, what we'll do is we always write a blog post that goes alongside the podcast itself. So any information that you haven't added but would like to share, we can always put onto that blog post as well, which will be available online on our website. And I guess that's the end of our conversation. We've kind of come to a natural conclusion at this point. So thank you very much again for joining me today and sharing your story with us. And I look forward to seeing you on the hills some more.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you should come out with us sometime, Jacqueline.
I will do, yes. I did my first hill this year, so hopefully next year I'll be more able to get. And I had you in the back of my head because I know when we met up at the Tom Navati Stone Circle, you kept saying it's one foot in front of the other. Walking's the same. So as I was going up, I kept saying 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other.
as long as you can walk and talk at the same time, that's all that matters. It's not none of our walks are really rushed. So it's just getting out and enjoying it. That's the thing.